Happy Friday, everyone. I'm Nick Slavik. I'm the owner and proprietor of the Nick Slavik Painting and Restoration Company. I'm also the host of this show, Ask a Painter Live, a weekly live Facebook show where you ask any questions you've ever wanted to ask a pro painter, restorationist, decorator, wallpaper hanger, anything else, and I will answer those questions live here. Today we have a couple questions sent in. One is about restoring the outside of an antique clawfoot tub. The second is about some basic drywall repairs. So, if you found this feed, you have found the Ask a Painter page on Facebook. That is the home of Ask a Painter. You can send in any questions there, write a post to that page, add some pictures, your questions, your comments, whatever you like. I will get to those. And yeah, any questions you have during the show here, type them in, and I will get to those at the end here. The hashtag Cottage Cabin project is coming along nicely. It's a new Northwoods, Minnesota cabin built from the ground up, styled after a 20 or 30 sort of bungalow cabin. All the drywall is primed up there. The homeowner is actually installing all the trim. He's making all the trim himself, using a bunch of salvage doors, things like that. And I'll be going up in the next couple weeks here and starting the trim finishing process. So that'll be a fun one to follow along. If you want to get updates, pictures, interesting things that are happening with the Cottage Cabin project, search for hashtag Cottage Cabin, and a lot of that pictures will show up in your feed there. Let's see. Also, coming this spring, the restoration of my own home, a 100-year-old kind of craftsman cottage. We're doing the complete exterior renovation of that one, coating renovation. Let's see, what else do we have here? Okay, on to questions. Sarah Perryman, she wrote in, I'm going to be painting the exterior and feet of an old cast iron clawfoot tub. The feet are pretty rusty. Are there any specific products that you'd recommend? Brush or spray. The tub is currently installed and removal to flip and paint isn't an option. Okay, I've done my own clawfoot tub twice actually in my house. I have the same tub that Sarah has, and if you go to the Ask a Painter page, you will see that I posted pictures not only of my restored tub, but she sent a picture in of her tub that needs to be restored. So you can follow along there and see those. Number one, I have done my tub in place. When we first moved into our house, I just wanted to freshen it up. So I just basically cleaned it up, sanded it down a little, and coated it with some Rust-Oleum enamel on the outside after doing an adhesion test. If you can actually, well, years later we did a complete renovation on my bathroom. I actually took the tub out, cleaned the whole works up, took all the feet off, sanded them down, and redid everything on it. Because these cast iron tubs are very, very stable, you don't have to use an acrylic paint on it. Acrylic is a much more flexible paint, but you don't need it with a stable material like that. So basically what I would do, Sarah, with that is if you can get to it, what I did was, most of those tubs, the only thing holding them onto the bathroom is the actual weight of it itself, and then the plumbing that comes up, the stack that comes up through the floor there. So what I did was basically just lift it up. I stuck a bunch of cardboard and rosin paper under it to give myself a clean working surface and to protect the floor. When I took it all apart, I actually took the feet off and I wire wheeled them to get rid of the rust. So there's a couple ways you can get rid of the rust on these clawfoot tubs. Number one, a really cool product is actual rust reformer. It's a chemical that you can apply to it, kind of like paste stripper, and it actually reforms the rust into this black sort of matte material chemically, and you can either scrape it off, sand it, leave it there, paint over it if it's not too bubbly and uneven. If it's just a little bit of surface rust though, it's really, really easy to just wire wheel, or even on a big flat surface like the side of an antique clawfoot tub, you can actually just take a random orbital sander with maybe 180 grit, 160 grit, something like that. Obviously protect your house, protect yourself, and sand all that rust off there. Wipe everything down with a bunch of alcohol, and then anywhere there's bare metal, anywhere where there's some existing oil paint, things like that. I'm a huge fan of oil primer in this case, and Zinsser Cover Stain, Fresh Start, Benjamin Moore, a whole bunch of stuff like that. It's good. Those are sort of like architectural wall stuff. For my clawfoot tub, I actually used an implement paint from my local hardware store. It's a true kind of old style oil paint. They also have primers to complement that too. So because it's a true oil, it's not like a modified alkyd or anything like that. it tends to be brittle, but when you put it on a cast iron tub, the iron's really not going to move all that much. So it's a very good product for metal where you don't have moisture coming in and out of it like you would wood or other materials like that. So after I cleaned it all, prepped it all, wiped it down with alcohol, I used a oil primer. And in this case, I enameled my tub white, and I did a kind of a decorative effect on the feet and my radiator next to it. I used a white oil primer on everything. Sanded that down, it was nice and smooth. Again, shop vacked it off, tack ragged it off, and then I brushed on actually it was 2 coats of that implement paint in a satin white enamel. You can spray these things. I would not do it in your house though. If you can get it out, get it in the yard, garage, shop, something, go ahead and spray them. But you know, when you're using a true oil, it actually has a long open time, and that longer open time, which means it's going to stay wet or tacky longer. A benefit of that is it'll actually level out a little bit. So for that reason, I use natural bristle brushes. This one, these are really, really economical, really, really good brushes. This is a Worcester Yachtsman, and this one is a Commodore from Sherwin-Williams. They're both hog hair bristle brushes. They're natural. You can tell they're not the nylon. You know, the clear or the purple or the blue filaments like that. These are actual hog hair from China. Now, sometimes they're called China bristle too. But these two, you know, you can get these for $8, the 2.5 or the 3-inch version. And you know, surprisingly, for having a plastic handle and kind of a stamped metal ferrule, they're a very, very high quality brush. Yeah, the price doesn't belie how good these brushes really are. So I love these things because I wash them out, I use them half a dozen times, and then, you know, they're only $8, so you either use them for a cleaning brush then or toss them. But the benefit of a natural or a hog bristle brush is that it holds oil better. If you use a nylon bristle brush, you tend to get a lot of spitting and drips, and you can't really load it up that much. But these are very absorbent. Naturally, if you put these in water, they'll actually swell and get puffy because they actually absorb some of the stuff because of their natural properties. So these also, they have very, very soft tips. You can put on the oil this way. It'll give it a nice thick coat on there, and it'll level off, and you can clean it out. I usually use a double rinse of mineral spirits. You know, 1 dirty can, 1 clean can. Clean it out first, dry it off, then go to the clean can, and you can get 6 or 8 uses out of some of these things if you clean them out really well. So I would brush it in your case, Sarah, especially if you can't get it out of the house. The oil will level off really, really well. Sometimes what you find though with these clawfoot tubs is they've been painted a whole bunch of times over the years. A lot of times whoever's painting the walls would just take that roller and just kind of do the outside. So most tubs that I encounter, I don't know that I've ever seen a true original outside finish on a clawfoot tub. Now the inside, the porcelain enamel is still original on mine. It's just beautiful. But it's been painted a lot of times on the outside. If you have a whole bunch of unstable paint, or it's just drips and glops of paint and somebody didn't take the time, you probably should use a sander to get it all off, or even paste stripper to you know, methyl ethyl chloride to get it on there. Now that's a whole nother deal. You know, it's a very, very caustic material, but you know, if you can't get that tub smooth, there's really no reason to proceed with it like that. So yeah, that's what I would do. A couple options for top coat, you know, besides the implement enamel, I like the true oils for this stuff. Like I was saying before, it's a very stable material. You're not going to get a lot of moisture migrating through solid cast iron. But if you wanted to use, you know, this is satin and pervo, an old-time oil enamel from Benjamin Moore. This stuff is really, really good, and it's a fine architectural millwork finish, so it dries super, super smooth. This one just happens to be their pre-finished black. But it can come in any color, whites, off-whites, things like that, to match anything. So another option, if you don't want the smell of that, there's a whole bunch of new sort of industrial stuff. Now, if you go to Sherwin-Williams, you will not find this on the shelf. And if you're not a pro painter, you probably won't know to ask for this, but this is DTM. There's oil DTM and there's acrylic DTM, and sometimes there's even hybrids of both. Now, DTM means direct to metal. It's a industrial metal finish that can go right on top of bare or prepped metal. And it's a very, very good product. I actually use these on metal pole barns, things like that. It's got a little bit of move to it. And my shop fridge is actually done with this can. It was kind of a cool project that I did with that, kind of a sea mist green, and it holds up just as good as the enamel that actually came on the fridge. So those are a couple options if you don't want to use a true oil enamel. The DTM has a pretty good open time, so if you use a nylon brush with that, you can get a pretty smooth coat on there. You just want to tint your primer. If you're going white, not a big deal. Get some white primer, white over the top. If you're going with a deeper color, tint your primer, because most DTMs, things like that, they don't cover very well. They're made to be sprayed with sort of industrial or professional spray equipment. And if you brush them, you'll find that you don't get really good coverage. But if you tint the primer, that'll kind of remediate that. So, Sarah, hope that answers your question. I did post a picture of mine. Oh, the feet I probably should mention. That you can either use a rust reformer or a wire wheel on your feet. I only had 2 feet that showed, and the back ones were in good shape, original finish on them. I left them be. The 2 front feet that show on the side, I wire wheeled those down to bare metal, scraped off little whatever floor finish that was on from the previous stuff, and used an oil primer again on those. And I wanted something a little different on them because they were metal. A lot of times you'll see in very nice tubs they'll be nickel plated. Or chrome plated, or satin finish, something like that. They're really kind of decorative and they got ornate features on them. So I actually did a hand hammered antique gold effect. It was a product at the time. This might have been 8 years ago from Rust-Oleum. It came in a rattle can, and after I got a good coat of primer on there, sanded the primer a little bit to make it smooth, I put on 2 coats of this hammered effect. And what it is this antique gold was. It's got this really kind of old patina, antique brass sort of thing, and if you put a couple coats on, there's a chemical in there that actually separates the paint a little, and it actually looks hammered, like you hammered it with a hammer bunch. It gives this real kind of mottled, interesting effect, and I posted pictures of this on Sarah's post, and then I shared it as well. So if you guys want to see pictures of how I did that, I ended up doing the radiator right next to it too. I thought it was a really cool finish, so it kind of complements the tub a little bit. So Sarah, if you have any more questions, you let me know, or any more specific questions of your tub, I'd be happy to answer those. The next question is from Zach Kane. I got a question for you, Nick. What's the best way to patch 1/2 inch to 1 inch holes in drywall? I've used several different kinds of spackle, and it ends up looking terrible. So, okay, here's the deal. Most of the time, I carry around 2 kinds of mud with me. Lightweight regular drywall mud, and then a vinyl spackle. Lightweight, everybody knows what this stuff is. When people build new homes, this is basically what your walls are made out of besides a wallboard. What I carry as a pro is some vinyl spackle as well. It's a little thicker product, it dries quicker, it's got a little bit of sponge to it because of the vinyl. Now, it's not great for doing a large joint, a large area, because it doesn't spread all that well. It sands a lot harder. The lightweight mud, the regular mud, sands beautifully. So if you got a big area, a big patch to do, that's your stuff to do. But nail holes, small little nail pops and things, the vinyl is perfect because you can put that stuff on. 20 minutes later, you can sand it nice and smooth. And for standard interior wall painting, the lightweight vinyl mud here really does a good job for pros that need to sort of speed up the prep process on those projects. So, wall here, if you have standard nail pops, things like that, all you do is you basically take one of your putty knives like this, a smaller 2.5 or a 6 or an 8 inch like that, and you basically just put some putty over the top, sand it, call it a day. What Zach's asking about is when you have something about a quarter size hole or bigger. So I will see if I can't miss a stud here, but okay. So when you have a hole in your drywall like that, if you take regular mud, in this case, vinyl spackle like this, you can fill that hole. Now, this is fine. The only problem is there's nothing behind it, and it's not, anytime, if you were to pound a picture hole nail through there or something, or even push on it hard enough, you'll go right through the wall like that. So, what do you do when you have a big hole like this? You have a couple options. I'll wipe this off. Grab a rag real quick, and I will. Okay, so you got your hole in the wall. The easiest thing to do down at the hardware store, grab my stuff here. You can buy one of these. It's a self-adhesive mesh tape like this. It's basically like a drywaller's mesh tape. Comes with an adhesive backing. You peel the backing off like that, and you basically just adhere it. And the adhesive might be old on this guy, so what you can do is like that. I've probably been carrying around that piece for 5 years just in case in my pro stuff. So you can put a little mud on here like this. And you can actually just adhere that. And you can adhere that right over the hole like that. Now, what I would do, at least, so the mesh will give you a little bit of a stability there. I would probably leave it like this overnight, let it dry, come back, maybe scuff sand it a little bit, and then, you know, you can go right over the top of it like this. So that will be fine. Now, the only problem with this, and the reason that I don't use a lot of this, is that you're starting to build up onto the wall. And if you just leave it like this and you sand it, if you sand it down to that mesh to try and get it flat, you're still going to make a lump on the wall like that. So sometimes what you have to do then is start mudding it out farther and mud it out, you know, 18 inches in all directions. You're sort of just, you know, you're making a lot of work for yourself in that kind of way. So I carry these for emergencies. When I show up on a job site a long way from home and a homeowner says, oh, by the way, we have a doorknob hole in the wall that we need you to fix, I can get a patch like this done and dry and painted 2 specs in 1 day. So this is sort of a behind the glass break in emergency sort of thing. Like I said, the reason I don't like this is because you're making a lump on the wall. If you sand this and paint it in certain light with a shiny paint or a good paint, you might see a little a lump out of there. So I will show you another option here. Take this guy off. Okay, so back to our hole here. Now, if you have something like this and you want to do it the right way, if I have the time and the materials with me, I just did this on a project recently, but what you can actually do, you can take a scrap piece of drywall and try to fit it to the hole here, but a lot of the time, you know, trying to artistically go towards whatever hole you have is a little bit tricky. So what you can do is cut a scrap piece of drywall like this. You kind of set it over your hole. You trace it like that. You can use a utility knife. A lot of the times I carry utility knives, it's easy. I just happen to have a drywall saw in my shop. So what you can do is actually cut it out. Okay, now, you're making a bigger hole in your wall, but it's going to save you time and you're not going to make a lump there. So, you're still not going to have any backing behind it. So what you do then is, I carry these all the time, magically, surprisingly, I'm a painter. What you do is, break yourself off a chunk like this, and you actually put it behind the wall. Let's see if I can get my hand out of there, like this. Drywall screws, one through here, sink the head of the drywall screw. And when you have that in, this is actually going to make a nice strong wall patch. Then you can actually just take your plug and put it back in there. Now, if you cut it right and fix it right, what you can do this one might need to be trimmed a little bit. So we'll take the edge of this, you can kind of just trim it down a little bit with your drywall knife. See if we can fit that back in there. A lot of times if you fit this well enough, you can actually just put the plug back in there. And if it fits snug enough, this is actually a good repair. I got a little extra piece of paper right there. You just don't want a whole bunch of stuff sitting out proud of it. Now, technically, you can either leave your plug like this, or like I showed you before, you can take that painter stick and adhere it behind there. Either way, it's going to be a fairly strong wall patch. If you don't have the means to do the other stuff, this is fine too. This is actually a pretty solid patch. Over the top of that, again, if you want to do it quickly, a little bit of the vinyl mud, and then you can just sort of fill in the gaps here. And with vinyl mud, you can actually do a one-pass application with this stuff. So if you're using standard drywall mud, you'd probably want to leave it just like this, let it dry, scrape it, scrape the high spots off, and put a second coat on, maybe going a little farther, maybe 6 inches out. With vinyl mud, it doesn't crack, it doesn't shrink, you can actually go a little more. If you were to lay on regular lightweight drywall mud in a 1/4 inch thick or something, what you'll find is that it'll actually start cracking and crazing. You know, like Death Valley dirt, how it kind of separates in alligators. Because there's so much moisture in there, when the moisture leaves, it sort of, you know, separates again. With this stuff, it actually doesn't shrink. So, what you can do, put it on heavy like that, and I'll switch to, for a larger area, you can use a larger knife too. And then you just mud it out a little farther like that. Now, if you feel like you're still going to leave a lump on there, you can go maybe one more trowel width around there. But if you're using vinyl mud, you want to keep your patches to a minimum because it's a little tougher to sand. So this is just a basic drywall repair, really quick. And you know, when I do this stuff, I usually have to get this done in a day. Most of my projects with my apprentices are only about a day, day and a half, and a lot of times we don't have enough time to use lightweight drywall mud, do multiple days worth of mudding or waiting. So this is still strong and it's good, and it's still got some give. A little harder to sand, so you have to take your time with it. But otherwise, this is a very quick sort of you know, non-professional drywaller way to actually do a professional job with your drywall. So I will put this stuff down. Let's check the notes, see if I forgot anything. I think that's it. Let's go through some questions here. Joyce, thank you for watching. And Nick, good to see you tuned in here. Nick, why aren't you fishing? You should be on the beautiful warm day. Can't wait to see the clawfoot stuff. Have to do it with mine. Yeah, definitely. Check the Ask a Painter page. There will be pictures of mine and of Sarah's on there, actually. Casey, thank you for watching. Casey Palmer. James, thank you for watching, my friend. DTM, I agree, James. DTM is a great, great product. Jamie, thank you for your previous question, and thanks for watching today. Oh, the great Chris Shank. Chris asked, should I do that for cracks in the ceiling? Chris, if you're still watching, let me know what kind of ceilings you have. If they're flat, if they're sort of the popcorn, the cottage cheese, the acoustic texture, if they're a knockdown, if they're flat, something like that, and I can give you a remedy for that. But a lot of times, the two main kind of ceiling cracks, Chris, that I run into are the sort of hairline cracks when you know, I guess two wall boards sort of open up like that. And those are the really easy ones to fix. You basically just need to rub some vinyl spackle in there. And I use the vinyl for those, and in plaster repair too. I covered that in a previous Ask a Painter. But when you have a hairline crack, and let's say you have, okay, flat ceiling. Oh, yeah, this is the same thing, Chris. If you get a flat ceiling, there's no difference between the treatment between your walls and this. If you do have like a cottage cheese, which I actually do, you can see up here, you know, the super anal retentive way to do it is to scrape off the texture, retape it, do a patch like this, retexture it, but a lot of the times even a good drywaller has problems matching an existing texture like that. And then you have to repaint the whole ceiling. So, two kinds of cracks. There's ones that go this way, and then there's ones that sort of go this way and ride up like that. So If you have the hairline crack where it sort of comes out a little bit, that's the easiest one to fix. Use the vinyl again with that. And if there's a texture, I actually use my finger and kind of massage it in there, because you can't sand it. You'll sand the texture off the ceiling. So I massage it in there with my finger, and after you paint that, it just disappears. And the benefit of using the vinyl spackle in that case is it's got that little bit of give to it there. So if that ceiling, in the middle of the winter, you may get one of those hairline separation cracks like that when it gets dry in our part of the country. In the summer, when it's humid, you got the windows open, it might swell and go back. If you use the standard lightweight drywall mud or a regular all-purpose drywall mud, it's brittle and it may actually crack itself out and fall out. With the vinyl, it's actually got a sponge to it like that, some movement. So it'll kind of go back and forth like that. So that's the way I handle that. Now, worst case scenario, you get a crack in your ceiling. I see them a lot of the times when you have a big open vaulted ceiling with a gable ceiling like this, the edges running down like this, and there's a piece of drywall tape. When they join two boards, they actually take a kind of piece of like a joint tape. It's a piece of paper, it's a piece of mesh. Sometimes they use stuff like this here, and they actually make the joint between the two boards like that. Mud over it, adhere it in there good. When those boards move a lot, this whole piece of tape can actually just come out from the wall. So a lot of times if you see damage at the width of about 1.5 inches, 2 inches, about this width, the tape has actually come away from the wall, and it creates a very difficult problem. Like Chris Shank, if you got the flat ceilings, no big deal. You pull the tape off, you clean it up, lay a new piece of tape in there, bed it in mud, which means you lay mud in there first, lay a new piece of tape, and then just join it just like this here. If you have a textured ceiling, a trick that I use with like cottage cheese ceilings, when you get the tape cracks that come down, a lot of times the texture of the ceiling will still be adhered to it, but the tape will just not be sticking to the drywall anymore. What I'll do is I'll actually get up there with a caulking gun and a putty knife. Grab this guy here, and where the tape is coming away from the ceiling like this, I'll actually push the tape back with my putty knife, sort of in one of these things when I'm on my ladder, pull the tape down like that, and take my caulking gun and run a bead of caulk behind it. And then I'll take my putty knife and shove that caulk or that sealant all the way in there. And again, never a silicone, always a paintable caulk. And then you basically just take, so we don't ruin the texture, I'll take a big old rag and wad it up in my hand and use it as a cushion to kind of distribute the pressure a little bit and push that tape back up there. And a lot of the times, you get a little squeeze out there and you kind of rub it with your finger and it makes the crack disappear. For my clients who don't want to repaint, that biggest ceiling in the house, a lot of times this will actually fix it. And because it's 14 feet up in the air, you can't see it anyway. So that's that's a 5-minute fix for something like that. Whereas, if a drywaller came in there, he'd cut the tape out, re-mud it, bed it, probably a coat or two of mud, and then retexture. Huge mess in the house, probably a 2 or 3 day project, not complete days, but partial days, paint in the rear end, and then you still have to paint your ceiling. So, you have two very, very large ends of the spectrum on stuff like that. This is basically almost a free fix. I carry caulk with me. It takes me 5 minutes to fix something like that, and even if it's not perfect, it's sort of one of those lesser of two evil things where it's 98% good, but it's basically free to do, or it's going to be hundreds of dollars, and you have to repaint your whole ceiling, and then that's going to cost hundreds and hundreds and maybe even thousands of dollars to do. So, Chris, I hope that answers your question there. You got the easy one with flat ceilings. So I'll scroll through again, see if I missed anything. Dave Scaturo, good to see you, man. I'm the PDCA Expo is coming up in a couple weeks here, and Dave is an owner of a great painting company, Alpine Painting, and he's going to be on the opposite team of a industry debate that we're having. So I've been trying to hone my debate pretty good, Dave. I'm sure you are. I know last year we were on the same team, so it'll be kind of fun to see opposite teams there. Dustin lives right down the road from me here. Good to see you. James Gilbert, what about cracks in wall around door trim that goes out at a 45-degree angle? I find those almost all the time in houses that are up to 20, 30 years old around my neck of the woods. Either on the big gable ends in those open rooms, or kind of like you mentioned, from the ends of the doors, there's usually a hairline crack, because anytime you have an opening in a wall, that creates sort of a stress point, and more weight gets distributed to those certain points. So sometimes you'll have a stress crack that'll just kind of open up. You see this very often too when people have a big picture window on the outside wall of their house, and the picture window will span 6 to 8, sometimes even 12 feet like that, and that creates a stress point in the wall. And almost always you'll see a hairline crack right under the window and hairline crack right over, and they almost always correspond with joints in the drywall. That is the weak spot like that. So I do the same thing. If it's one of the hairlines that just comes apart like that, that's easy. Put a little mud in there, clean it out, and sand it. They go away great. Again, vinyl with that I end up using, because it's got that little bit of sponge, and if a house is 20 years old, 30 years old, and a crack opens up like that, it's probably not the first time. And as a matter of fact, in a house older than about 20 or 30 years old, you'll actually see a bunch of old patching there too. It's usually not the first time somebody tried to attack the patch. So again, that's the easy one to fix, the hairline that open up, because you basically just add mud to it. The ones that sort of push together and then they end up rippling the drywall like that, what I do is actually take a painter's tool, a 5-in-1, or a utility knife, and shave down everything proud of the wall. Because if you just mud over that, again, you're making a lump, and even if you sand it, you're still going to leave that big lump. And with the high quality interior paints that I use, normally an eggshell, you're going to see a little bit of shine, and if the light is just right on those things, the homeowner is going to just pick it out right away. So I always try to get it back to flat or less than flat, even scraping into the wall. So then when you mud, you're not adding to the wall. So if you have one of these that go up like that, shave all that off, and a lot of times I'll chase the crack with a putty knife, with a painter's tool, utility knife. I'll clean out that whole crack, get it out of there. A lot of times there's old mud, things like that. Clean it all up, and then you just start the mudding process again. James asks again, oh, Rob, thanks for watching. Good to see you, my friend. James, do you ever put tape over it? Again, for that reason, a lot of guys, the good guys can do it well, because they know that if you put mesh tape like this over a crack, what will happen is they will mud it out, a foot or two on either side. So yes, they're building it out from the wall, but it's such a gradual lump in the wall that you're not going to see it. The worst repairs I've ever seen, when you put this over and they just put a little mud over it, sand it, and you basically can see sort of the checkerboard of this mesh right through it. It's really not a good deal. So for that reason, I use the vinyl like this, and that seems to, you're not going to stop that crack moving. There is no way that a little bit of this mesh is going to stop a wall from moving, especially if there's moisture issues, climate issues, things like that. So going under the assumption that we are not going to stop this wall from moving, what I do is use the vinyl, because it'll go in there and it'll sort of, just move with it a little bit. Like I mentioned in a previous episode, somebody asked about plaster repair. There's a farmhouse not far from me. I completely restored the inside. It's sort of a vacation farmhouse, so people are only there seasonally. So most of the year it's kept at 40 or 50 degrees. In the summer, the windows are open, so you're going from very cold, very dry air to very hot, very humid air. And I by hand, I massaged vinyl spackle into every one of these hairline cracks in this old plaster in this farmhouse, and I think only one opened up in 6 years. So that's a good thing to do. And really, all it took was maybe a quart of this stuff for $8 and my time and my finger. So that's a really good fix for that. Now there's all sorts of invasive ways that you can try to address that, but honestly, you're not going to do better than that without really affecting the plaster. And this stuff, this plaster had a sand texture to it, very, very hard to simulate, because the sand texture goes back 100 years, and it's probably been painted 10 to 15 times. So the sand texture is not just a sand texture, it's sand plus 10 or 15 layers of lead, oil, water base, acrylic, whatever else, paint over the top. So it's a very, very hard texture to replicate like that. So I hope that helps out. Rob, Sherwin-Williams has structure crack tape. That works great. Is it, I'd be curious to see, is it like a mesh like this, or I've seen a bunch of the stuff that's actually kind of textured to make it look like a knockdown, stuff like that, to simulate that. But yeah, I don't, at least in my mind, I don't know that, if you're going over a crack, that crack is still going to be the weak spot. I don't know that you can stop a house from moving, especially if the framing and the wallboard is moving, just from this sort of thing. So James, I'll have to get some vinyl spackle, never used it. Usually just put 45-minute mud in there. And you know what, again, there's a whole bunch of ways to do this stuff. Through my 20 years of doing this, I have my methods down, but I have sort of not been influenced by other painters. Everything that I learned, I grew up in a painting company, but my painting company does quite a bit different kind of stuff than the one I came up in. So I took the basics from growing up in a painting company, but I've sort of evolved on my own over the years without a lot of outside influence. And I don't know, I found methods that work really, really well. And again, I always default to what's the highest quality product. Like, yes, you could, if you have a big hole in the wall, you can just shove a bunch of spackle in there, paint over it, and be done. But you're not really doing the homeowner a service. You know, you're not fixing it. You're just sort of patching, going over the top, putting a Band-Aid on something. This really doesn't take any longer, and you're actually really fixing their wall. So every one of my methods, every one of the products that I choose, ending up being, yes, it's probably going to be more work for me, but if I'm educated and I'm skilled and I'm motivated to do it, I should be able to do a very good job for the homeowner and still do it in a reasonable amount of time. So as an entrepreneur and a business owner, I can still keep tabs on the financials of my business and make sure that we're making money. So that's where I kind of find, and I sort of preach the question, is it better for you or the better for the homeowner? And what I find is that when a bunch of painters get together and talk about their methods and their products, a lot of times it defaults to, well, this dries quicker, it sands easier, it's this and that. But, the question never gets brought up, is this better for the homeowner? Mud like this, on almost all new homes that I see, this is good. And I use this stuff to fix a lot of cracks, large areas, things like that. If anybody's ever had experience with drywall from the 70s or even the 80s, it's very, very hard stuff. It's almost like the all-purpose mud where you can't push your fingernail in it, and it's very hard to break, very hard to sand, but it's a tough wall. It almost simulates old plaster. Nowadays, drywallers take that lightweight mud and they loosen it with a ton of water, so it's easier to sand and it's easier to apply. And what they're not sort of understanding is diluting that. Yes, it makes it work a little easier, but it's already lightweight mud, and you're diluting it even more. So you're making a wall that basically, if you take your knuckle like this and push into it, you can dent new construction walls, and it's sort of disgraceful. Like, yes, I understand that it's easier for them to sand, they can do it quicker, but my God, the dents and the cracks and this is drywall, old drywall, and this is nice and solid. If you wrap on a new construction wall, it sounds hollow. And even when you take a paint roller, you're rolling on the wall, it sounds like you're rolling a hollow building. So yes, I completely understand why drywallers do it. I just don't agree with it. But it is the industry standard. It is what it is, and you're not going to change, the industry standard and tell people to do a better job when they can do a quicker job. So it's just kind of the state of what is, and yeah, it's kind of how it works. Yeah, James, try out some of that vinyl spackle. It's not something, if you had a big, long crack on your wall and you really had to blend it all in, I would definitely use lightweight with that stuff. But, for small stuff, especially nail pops, nail holes, small bits of damage, rebuilding a corner bead on an outside, you have a 90-degree outside corner and it's all bashed up. It's really easy to work with this stuff where you can build one side, build the other, and sand it relatively smooth, and you can build quite a bit of damage out of that stuff in a short amount of time. So give it a try and let me know how it works out for you. It's not perfect, that's why I do carry both. But we're almost done with a fitness center in my hometown here. And if you can imagine, the lightweight mud, for anybody who's ever sanded this stuff, it is a dust storm of talcum powder when you sand this. With vinyl, with this stuff here, there's very little dust. And the dust that does come off of it is sort of chunky, and it sticks together and it falls straight down. It doesn't tend to be light and fly around in the air. So if you can imagine, thousands and thousands of square feet of black rubber floor, black exercise equipment, treadmills, things like that. These commercial buildings are full of damage. We used almost a gallon of mud in that building. If I would have sanded that stuff, that building would have been covered in a fine talcum powder dust. I used vinyl even for large spots in that fitness center because when you sand it, the dust falls straight down onto the drop cloth. We shot back it up and it's done, and there's no dust flying around. So another benefit of the vinyl is that not a lot of dust. So that's another reason I carry it around there. Rob's gonna send a pic. Yeah, I'd love to see a picture of that stuff. I'm always interested. So Sarah, good to see you joined in. I I covered your clawfoot tub about 20 minutes ago, so sorry you'll have to replay it here. But thank you so much for your question, and I love following your projects as well. So if there's no more questions here, guys, thanks everybody for watching. In the next couple weeks here, I'll actually be traveling to San Diego for the PDCA Expo, the Painting and Decorating Contractors of America Expo, and I was honored to be asked to do a master's class on cabinet finishing there. So I have almost a 2 gigabyte presentation with time-lapse videos, GoPro footage, stuff from the shop, spraying, prepping, everything else. It's sort of a master's treatise on how to paint pre-finished cabinets, you know, is something that's already had some stain and varnish on it, to the highest quality, but also, you know, as a business owner, do it in a way where you can actually feed your family by doing it. So that will be a highlight of the early 2017 to go down there and do that. I'll also be participating in the debate. There'll be 2 3-man teams in front of the entire expo, and we will be debating a topic specific to our industry, and that's going to be a riot. Last year, I couldn't have had more fun with it. It was such a cool thing, and Chris Shank, who chimed in a little bit earlier, he's actually in charge of that. So I can't wait to do that again. So again, just like New Orleans at the expo last year, tons of pictures, tons of videos. I'll be updating you guys on anything. It was a really fun trip. Love to meet all my fellow pros, and I'll be updating you guys on that. The cottage cabin project, hashtag cottage cabin, you can follow along with that. And then come the spring, again, I'll be doing a restoration on my 100-year-old house for its 100th birthday. So any other questions you guys have, send those to the Ask a Painter page, and we will see you next week.